Let's get reaction now to the defection of Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary to Reform UK, in the company of someone that was the actual Justice Secretary, former Lord Chancellor, Sir Robert Buckland KC. Sir Robert, welcome back to the show. Good to see you again, sir.
Hello, Mark. Good to see you.
We didn't see that one coming, did we? Your reaction to yesterday's political drama?
Well, I think we did. And I think that Kemi Badenoch saw it coming and acted very decisively yesterday morning and showed real leadership. Look, this has been talked about, Mark, for months, hasn't it? We've been hearing rumours about Robert Jenrick wanting to go to reform for a long time, and therefore it comes as no surprise that when he's rumbled, he then steps on a stage with Nigel Farage and trashes the very colleagues who he was praising only a few hours before. It's a very unedifying spectacle. It's not serious. I find the whole thing part of the Westminster farce. And, you know, for the public out there, it's mid-January, you know, it's cold, we're doing our tax returns, we're trying to make ends meet. Is this really the stuff that is going to change politics? I don't think so.
If Kemi Badenoch saw this coming, Sir Robert, why was he in the shadow cabinet?
Well, I think that she needed evidence, didn't she? You know, anecdote and hearsay are one thing, but then to have a letter, smoking gun, if you like, which then the contents of that letter seemed to be entirely what he said yesterday, particularly savaging, you know, former colleagues like Mel Stride and Priti Patel. It was true, wasn't it? It was clearly true. Kemi acted on the correct evidence and showed real decisive leadership. That's the sort of toughness that I like to see. I'm proud of her today for what she's done. And I'm sad that a former colleague, close colleague of mine, Robert, we were in cabinet together, in government together for a long time, has now transmogrified from a Conservative into some sort of pound shop Enoch Powell. It really is an edifying spectacle. And I don't think it does him any favours at all. He's a diminished figure today. Kemi Badenoch is a strengthened figure.
Wow, the gloves are off. Pound shop Enoch Powell. Now, Enoch Powell is a former Conservative politician who was accused of racism, particularly in regard to his rivers of blood speech. Is it not a little harsh laying that at Robert Jenrick's door? All he wants to do is scrap net zero and close the border.
No, some of his language in recent months has been really, really bordering on the incendiary. In fact, incendiary. It doesn't help to talk about places in Britain as being entirely absent when it comes to white people. It doesn't help to divide communities. We know that there are tensions and problems out there. I had to deal with a lot of them when I was in office and come down hard on people who were causing mayhem and terror on our streets. And I'm unapologetically a Christian man who believes in the values of this country. But you don't assert those values by seeking to divide. What you do is to bring the country together. And what I see in reform is a lot of noise and anger and a lot of rhetoric, but none of the solutions that we're going to need to get this country back together. And the Conservatives are absolutely hell-bent on getting those answers, thinking carefully, developing policy, and coming up with mature, sensible policies. You know, the general election, Mark, isn't for another few years, 3 years probably. This needs to be time in which we make a plan. You know, we just elected a bunch of politicians who had no plan for this country, the Labour government, and we can see the shambles there. Are we really going to elect another bunch of politicians in reform who also have no plan for this country? I very much think not.
Do you interpret some of Robert Jenrick's remarks in the past, particularly in relation to not seeing a white face in certain parts of the Midlands, as racist?
Look, I think it's bordering on that, I'm afraid. I think that how does that help anybody? How does that actually deal with some of the issues in our country? You know, we've got alienation in white working class communities. We've got alienation in other parts of our society. Those are the questions we've got to ask. I agree that trust is at an all-time low when it comes to politics. But I tell you, yesterday's antics don't help restore that trust. When you hear, you know, a leading politician say one thing, you know, about his colleagues on day one and then completely different stuff on day two, what are the public going to make of that? Can you really trust people who are prepared to just, you know, do a complete volte-face and say things that of the opposite to what they were saying only a day or so before?
Now, Sir Robert, I understand your measured response to some of these previous remarks, but if Robert Jenrick says that he's in parts of the Midlands and doesn't see a white face, is that not a reflection on a rapidly changing society that no one voted for? I don't think my viewers and listeners are racist or even anti-immigration, but is it not brave of a politician to point out that society is changing at a rate with which the public are not comfortable?
I don't think it's brave of a politician to just reflect inchoate anger. I think what is brave is to talk about these issues in a way where we come up with solutions. I agree that there are certain parts of this country where we don't have that integrated society that we all believe in. And I think part of that is our fault. I think there's been a vacuum at the top of the British state in so many ways in terms of our assertiveness about our values. And I talk a lot about the Christian values of this country. I'm a person of faith myself, but even if you don't have faith, that is the tradition of this great country, and the rule of law and freedom all come from that Western tradition that is really embedded in that Christian faith. And we should talk about it. Let's be honest about it. And I think you'll find that other faiths will respect that even more, rather than presenting a rather woolly, jelly-like vacuum. Sorry to mix my metaphors there, Mark, but you know what I'm saying. A sort of a completely, flabby exterior, as if we've lost confidence in who we are as a country. I'm deeply proud to be British, deeply proud to be part of a tradition that goes back centuries. I want to assert that because I believe in freedom under the law. Now, if people don't share those values, then frankly, they either should be, and they act in a way that is criminal, they should be dealt with by the courts, or they shouldn't be part of this country. I'm more than happy to have that debate. What I don't like is politicians just reflecting anger and not coming up with any solutions. And I'm afraid that's what I see with Farage and co.
What do you make of Robert Jenrick's shift to the right, Robert? Because, Sir Robert, I know that you know Jenrick well. Is his political journey into the bosom of Reform UK and a more robust right-wing position, is that authentic or is it confected?
Look, I don't have a window into other men's souls, to quote Elizabeth I, but I'm surprised. In fact, I'm amazed to see the journey that Robert's been on. I can remember getting elected in Newark in a by-election with pictures of Ken Clarke on his leaflets. He, in fact, got elected then with the support of other party voters to stop a UKIP candidate who was seen as a very strong challenge in the by-election. It's funny, isn't it, that now 12 years on, we're in a position where he could well very much be in that category as a person who other parties perhaps will not want to vote for. I just find the journey extraordinary. I don't think it's just down to his time in the Home Office. I'm afraid I see personal ambition, particularly in the latter years, his failed leadership bid, his refusal to accept that, his constant talking outside his justice brief. All this was a real headache for Kemi Badenoch. As she rightly said, he's not her problem anymore. It's Nigel Farage's problem now.
However, do you think a key aspect of the current challenges facing the Conservative Party is where they've been positioned within the political spectrum? This is the party, of course, of Margaret Thatcher, who rescued Britain from being the lazy man, the weak man, the sick man of Europe into a global economic, diplomatic and military powerhouse. Aren't Reform UK supporters and the likes of Jenrick just nostalgic for a time when the Conservatives really were conservative? Why do you think that the party appears to have shifted left in so many areas, such as the infiltration of woke ideology in our public institutions, with the NHS calling women chest feeders or birthing humans, with a net zero project that the former Prime Minister Theresa May was told by her Chancellor would cost £1 trillion, a very, very illiberal and rather authoritarian response to the pandemic. Why do you think that the party shifted leftwards? Because I think that's why it faces its current challenges.
I don't think that's the correct, with respect, I don't think that's the correct characterisation at all. I think the party shifted leftwards. I don't recall us ever supporting that sort of woke agenda. I mean, I threw Stonewall out of the MOJ when I was in charge. I locked up more dangerous prisoners than my predecessors, and I dealt with terrorists very, very harshly, quite toughly. I think left and right becomes a bit redundant, especially when you look at reform, which, support things like ending the two-child benefit cap, which is massively popular in the country. It talks about the sort of state interventions that, frankly, would make Karl Marx blush. I don't see reform as particularly ideologically right-wing. I think they're a real ragbag and hodgepodge of ideas that are cobbled together that are designed to be populist. That's very different from left and right, Mark. The Tory party has never been defined by the ideologies of left and right. We are a party that is older than any other party in this country. We reflect the common ground of politics and the common sense of the British people. And yes, there are times when that has been departed from, and the party's paid a big price only in 2024 for that. And, that result is something that we are still reflecting on and understanding. And I'm sorry that it came to that pass. But that does not mean that the Conservative Party is over. Far from it. Those people who write off the Tory party do not understand the history of this country. And I think that, therefore, with proper thought, which Kemi Badenoch is providing, and proper leadership, which she's providing, we are rebuilding and we will return. And we have to, because at the moment, the real danger in this country is not just a Labour government that is moving leftward with every heartbeat, but the appalling prospect in a hung parliament of some sort of Labour Green Lib Dem coalition that I think ends the free market, ends any chance that we have of having smaller government, and really would put this country, into the realms of Albania or Venezuela if we're not careful. And I'm not exaggerating. For people who say unite the right, I say unite behind a party that genuinely believes in trying to get the tax burden down, genuinely believes in business and enterprise, and genuinely has the solutions and the deep thinking and the plan that we need in order to do this. We elected Labour without a plan. They're a shambles. Reform, really, it's all rhetoric and no plan. Got no time for that anymore. I want my next government to have a plan. And what I see with Kemi and the work she's doing is the germination of a plan. I love things like ending stamp duty, great policy. We want more of that, please, in order to help convince the British people that we're on their side and that we have earned the right to govern once again.
So, Robert, I understand your comments about this latest incarnation of the Conservative Party. It has its history, the most successful political movement in the history of Western democracy. Kemi Badenoch's been strong at Prime Minister's questions and in her budget response. Some very popular policies as well, an improvement in the polls. But we just have to look at the record in office. And going back to this discussion about, where the Conservatives are calibrated within the political spectrum. And I would just, draw your attention to a few things. An ever-expanding welfare state under the Conservatives. Net zero, the pursuit of which is obviously going to have a big impact on our economy and on industry. The Chinese communist-inspired policy of lockdowns during the pandemic. And of course, the small matter of legal migration of 1 million people in a year. None of these things are Conservative policies.
Well, look, I can unpack all of that for you, Mark, as quickly as possible. I would say that the reaction to the pandemic was understandable in the context of the time. We didn't know precisely what we were dealing with. I was in cabinet having to make these decisions. Do you think that any of us wanted to do what we did? Of course we didn't. And of course we're criticised in a judge-led inquiry for not locking down early enough. I think that we did everything we could in order to preserve public safety, and particularly, my role in making sure that we didn't have disorder and riots in prisons, was a really important part of that particular policy. I think that on migration, post-COVID, we were always going to see that rebound in terms of the number of people coming into the country. During COVID, very few people came here because of the lockdown restrictions. Then we saw that surge in numbers, students coming in. We still count students in the numbers. I don't know why. I think that's unhelpful and misleading. We had the Ukrainian and Hong Kong schemes are absolutely right. Now we're going to a position where we'll probably see a net reduction in migration in the next few years because of tightening up that the last government the Conservative government made on income requirements, and then, frankly, an appalling Labour economic policy that is putting off anybody of any talent from wanting to come here. Of course, we need migration, but we need the right kind of migration. and Conservatives need to focus on making sure that we have high net worth individuals who have something to offer in terms of investment in this country coming here, rather than just relying on cheap labour. And I think, I accept that that was the problem, and I think a lot of people rightly are concerned about that. But, when it comes to benefits, I was part of a government that imposed so-called austerity, when we introduced the benefit cap, when we, in effect, changed housing policy so that people weren't living in, millionaires' flats on benefits, and that we were reducing the benefit bill. I think COVID has had a long effect upon the way in which government operated. Government definitely became bigger in COVID, a bit like a wartime situation. And I think that a properly thought out Conservative plan to reduce the role and size of government post that pandemic crisis is something that we still need and can still do, if we have an election before the end of 2028-29.
So, Robert, getting messages coming in thick and fast. Gavin Cornwall says he doesn't agree with what you've said. He said, your guest, Robert Buckland, talks about society cohesion. His Tory party has absolutely destroyed the community spirit by letting in so many illegals from so many cultures with values opposed to ours. The Conservatives ruined this country and will never be forgiven. Vote reform. This from Mark, who says, Sir Robert is exactly the reason why Jenrick leaving for reform was the right decision for the country. The Conservatives are Lib Dems now. Don't worry, I'll give you the right to reply. Martin in Lichfield. Good morning, Mark. There you go. The Tories are toast. Sir Robert Buckland, a true Liberal and in denial over the failures of the Tories' past record. Disgusting statement about Robert Jenrick being racist. Talking the truth is not racist, just honest. And last but not least, Amanda. Sir Robert Buckland, I'm afraid, though meaning well, is typical of the Liberal left-leaning figures within today's Conservative Party. So look, a bit of resistance to what you've had to say, Sir Robert. What about issues raised there? For example, illegal immigration. This exploded on the watch of the Conservatives. Why is it a good idea to exit the ECHR now? And why wasn't it a good idea when the Conservatives were in power?
Well, I don't think it is a good idea to exit the ECHR. It's a total red herring. It's not going to solve the issue of how we deal with migration. The whole of Western Europe is facing this wave of migration from people who want to come here because they live in parts of the world which are either war-torn or economic basket cases. Of course they want to come to a place like Britain. We've got the English language, we've got the wonderful culture, and it's an attractive place to come to. Now, I am absolutely yield to nobody in my determination to try and deal with illegal migration. And indeed, when I was in government, we tightened up the law considerably in order to make sure that it became a specific criminal offence and we had the means in which we could deal with it. But when you shut one door, for example, the Channel Tunnel and lorries, remember the problem we had with that, you open another one, and that's why we got the small boats phenomenon. But any politician who pretends they've got an easy answer to it, is
it snake oil from Kemi Badenoch then to suggest that the exiting the ECHR would somehow stop the boats? Is she being disingenuous and dishonest?
No, look, I think, she thought about it. She commissioned a report from my friend Lord Wolfson about it, and they've given it a lot of thought. And I'm not going to criticise Kemi for having, come to that view. It took her about a year or so to consider the issue. She genuinely thinks that it's part of the problem. I think that the issue lies elsewhere, and I think the solution is actually an international one. If we can, stop and divert these people from actually coming through Europe and change the refugee convention, that's the real problem here, to redefine what safe countries mean. Because at the moment, people are travelling through dozens of safe countries before they get to Britain, and that just seems to me to be, a convention that is now well out of date. Then I think we can make progress. But, I'll say this to viewers who think I'm some sort of liberal. I joined the Tory party 41 years ago in the middle of the miners' strike because I wanted to support Margaret Thatcher and her Conservative government against Marxist far-left union leaders who wanted to bring down a democratically elected government. I've been out canvassing for the Tories in South Wales, facing all sorts of abuse, and the controversy and the fight has been part of my life. I'm a Tory. I'm not a Liberal. I will always be a Tory. And if people don't understand that the Tory party is a broad church that has people who have the best interests of this great country at heart and want to make it greater still, well, go and vote Reform. But if you vote Reform, you're voting for probably a more European style of movement than anything that we're used to in Britain. I find the Reform Party and its approach very un-British in the way that they deal with things. I think the Tory party epitomises the very best of our country, and we have to earn the right again to come back into power. That will be a long road, and I accept that. Humility has to be part of it, and I've always believed as a Christian man that humility has to be part of our politics. I'm seeing very little of that, I'm afraid, from the likes of Robert Jenrick and others who think that they can pull the wool over our eyes and change positions on the toss of a coin.
Sir Robert, a couple of seconds to go. We're so grateful for your time. It's a really interesting conversation. Last but not least, I'm the son of Irish immigrants myself, and I don't think any of my viewers and listeners are anti-immigration. I think the issue is the scale in recent years. So it's a really quick one for you, Sir Robert. Whilst we welcome our multi-ethnic society, is it wrong, would you say, that 1 in 5 Brits were born overseas? Is that too high?
Yeah, I think that there comes a position where if you were born overseas, where do your loyalties lie? If you come to this country and want to be part of this country, wherever you're from, you should owe your loyalty to Britain. And I'm tired of people who want to, fly flags of other countries above our own. The Union flag. Let's fly that proudly. Be British. If you come and choose to be British, then be British. Enjoy your heritage, but remember that you're a British citizen now, and your loyalty is to us, this great country.
Well, I've got to say, Sir Robert, we've thoroughly enjoyed having you on the show. Always a privilege. Great to see you again. I hope you'll join me again in the near future, because it's all about opinions on this show, and it's been very, very good to have yours, given your experience in politics and as a legal professional as well. Sir Robert Buckland, KC, former Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary, top lawyer as well. Your reaction to the remarks of Sir Robert Buckland